to the Center for Career
You,
and Professional Development. So I'll just start at the beginning. You know, when you make the decision to become an attorney, I think there's two ways to go about it. You have your traditional and non-traditional. I'm certainly non-traditional. I graduated in, dare I say it, 20 years ago, 99. And I decided to take a couple of years off. I worked for a nonprofit organization at the City Bar Fund. Back in the days, it used to be called the New York City Bar Association. Over time, they changed their name, and did great work there. I actually had that relationship before I went into law school, and I continued it during law school. So there's a tip already: continue your relationships, never burn bridges. So I took a couple of years off after college. I worked there. I was accepted into Albany Law School in upstate New York. I'm originally from Brooklyn, so as you can imagine, it was a little bit of a culture shock to go to upstate New York. But I figured, hey, that's where the laws are made. I want to be as close to the state government as possible, and that's what I did. Spent a great 3 years there, learned a lot. I had an interesting internship when I was working there or going to school there. And it was for the Albany County Airport Authority. For those of you who don't know, just think of Kennedy Airport or JFK Airport on a much, much smaller scale. What a lot of people don't know about airports is that they're run like buildings, like little mini cities. So you have your leasing, you have your capital projects, you have your eminent domain, unfortunately, your slip and falls. You're leasing to airlines, you're leasing to all those retail outlets that are creating this hub of activity in the airport. So a lot goes on into managing an airport, and that's where I developed a love for commercial real estate. So by the time I graduated in 2004, I decided it's time for me to do commercial real estate. So back down to the city I went. I settled in New Jersey, and I worked in New York for a few years. I was lucky enough to accept a position with a global real estate company. Some of you may have heard of it. It's called Jones Lang LaSalle. And what I did there was commercial property management. You know, when you're coming out of law school and you have a law degree, it really increases your marketability. And so commercial real estate was, we're talking about 20 years ago, very, very male dominated. And so it was an interesting time to enter into that group because there's so much to learn in commercial real estate. So I decided I'd work for this company and I'd have a few clients, and these clients, they ranged from folks that owned a couple of buildings in Midtown Manhattan to companies that owned these buildings in Midtown Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, and I would manage their real estate. So I had an understanding of commercial real estate leases. I learned the basics of operations. I learned how to budget their properties. So you had to have an understanding of financial accounting. If there's a course you're thinking of taking in law school, definitely take accounting for lawyers. Completely opens the door in terms of understanding how to read a financial statement and understanding what goes into managing an asset. It was a great time to be there. I spent a couple of years at Jones Lang LaSalle. I was picked up a couple of years later by CB Richard Ellis, which is now CBRE. They're also another global real estate firm. And I worked with them for about 5 years until I decided to work for an owner and developer of real estate called RXR Realty. If you've never heard of RXR, they are amazing at what they do, and they developed Hudson Yards. So that just gives you some type of idea of what they've done. So I worked with them, and I moved over to New Jersey. So for a time I was working in New York and New Jersey, and I was managing their New Jersey region now, which was about 16 properties. very involved in the leasing and management and budgets and operations of those properties. And I just continued my zest for commercial real estate leasing and negotiations. Um, Fast forward, I woke up one day, another time to pivot, and I said, you know what? I really want to do this full-time lawyer thing. And so I transitioned full-time into a legal position. Now I work for a company called CFSC. They are, I would say, probably around 30 years, and they manage and own about 200 locations. They're in the check cashing business. And so I deal with their New York and New Jersey region. I do all of their commercial leasing and negotiations. So I deal directly with the landlords, any municipal issues. I deal with that, some operations, because of course, you know, once you're in property management, you always are in property management. So I continue lending support, but my main focus here is the legal operations of managing multiple stores across the 5 boroughs of New York and New Jersey. And it's a wild ride. It's about 85 stores. With COVID, it's been very interesting because, as you know, that impacts everywhere. So we're constantly keeping an eye as to what's changed. You have to follow the laws, and obviously we're a financial services company. So anything that impacts our business, I have to keep an eye on it. You know, I also deal with regulations, any regulatory matters and compliance. We're heavily regulated by the state of New York. And it's been interesting. For those of you that are contemplating law school and entering a law firm, this is an in-house counsel position, which basically means I'm an attorney on behalf of a company. So I represent their legal interests. I don't work in a law firm. And there's, you know, pros and cons to that. It depends on what type of quality of life you're looking for after law school. I think that there's a tremendous amount of skill that you can acquire from working in a law firm. But there's also a tremendous amount of skill that you can learn from, you know, working for a company. You develop that business acumen, and it really helps when you've worked in the corporate environment before you enter into an in-house legal position. So that's what I've gone through in a nutshell. I definitely went the alternate route. You know, I came into this company with about 13 years in commercial real estate operations before I became in-house. So it's been a wonderful ride. I learned something new every day. And, you know, I really enjoy being an attorney because you're exposed to a continuous challenge, and you're constantly, you know, bettering yourself at what we call lawyering. You'll never be able to learn this type of critical thinking anywhere else. I'm sure there are other tons of challenging careers, but I will say that becoming a lawyer has been very valuable. So I'm opening up to any questions. I'll be as honest as you'd like for me to, without scaring you too much.
So everyone, Chanjamir, I hope I'm pronouncing that, and I apologize.
It's okay, Ahmed.
Oh, Mr. Ahmed. Okay, Ahmed. What is your question?
Well, my question is, well, I just want to start off by saying, thank you for coming, and also, I'm a recent graduate from John Jay as well, and I got my degree in criminal justice, and I think I read that you got your degree in criminal justice as well.
I did. I graduated with a minor in English and a major in criminal justice, a Bachelor of Arts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I really want to hear you. I really want to hear that, actually.
Okay, so, you know, I receive this question a lot. In terms of the appropriate degree to get into law school, I think having a legal background, a legal interest, especially in criminal justice, it's valuable. But I would always say keep your doors open, even if it's a liberal arts degree, if it's an English degree, political science is great, legal studies is great, but definitely think broader. In your case, you already graduated, criminal justice, again, a solid, a solid road into law school. What were you thinking of doing when you graduate?
Well, my initial plan was to go and do something else, but that has been cut. So right now, like I'm doing a complete 180, and I'm actually trying to figure out how to become a paralegal. So I've been taking one of the first things I've done is take a continuing education course that's offered by Kingsborough, which offers a certificate at the end of it in for a paralegal. I mean, it's not a certification; it's just a certificate because I know there's a difference. And I'm trying to do that. I mean, I'm a little disappointed because I feel like the course that I'm taking, it just like goes to the chapters in the book, and it doesn't really, it's not really teaching me legal research techniques, and it's not really teaching me like how to read a course and how to use IRAC properly. So I'm trying like because when I'm applying for a paralegal position, I want to make sure that I stand out and I can actually do the job that's required of me. So that's what I'm doing currently, is trying to figure out how to become a paralegal and a proficient one.
Okay, so if that's what you want to do, great. I will say that when you are going for a paralegal certification, it's not going to teach you how to understand legal theory and synthesize and read briefs. You're taught how to you should be taught how to do some research, but if you were in law school, you have to unlearn all of that anyway, because they start you from scratch. So it's like a boot camp for your mind, and they teach you how to properly research the old school way and also the new school way, which is Westlaw and LexisNexis, everything online. But they start you from the bottom up. So, you're going to learn how to research, you're going to learn how to brief a case. I will say for those of you who are contemplating law school, take the summer prior to your first year to teach yourself how to brief a case, because you're going to be doing that a lot. And it's much easier to expose yourself than trying to get the hang of it while you're already in law school in your first year. If that answers your question.
No, I mean it gives me some aspects, yeah, but like I said, right now I'm just trying to, because like I'm trying to get a position as a paralegal. I'm not thinking about going to law school right now. That's like a future investment, but like right now it's just like how to become like a legal assistant or a paralegal for like a law office.
Interesting. Again, I think you should reach out to, because I will tell you the big law firms are always looking for a paralegal, but I don't know if they're going to start you off as without having the certification. That's probably more of an Edwin question.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's why like I'm
You would have to
doing
make an appointment with us.
right now. Yeah.
Well, real quick, I'm gonna take one raising by, I know folks have raised their hands on it, so I'm gonna tailor this. I'm gonna do one hand raise as I just got Ahmed. I'm gonna take one from the chat.
Okay.
I know one of the chat is,
Yeah, I see a bunch that came in on the chat.
yeah, what's some advice you would give someone wanting to become a lawyer?
You want to have emotional intelligence. So what I mean by that is you are going to have some rough personalities, and you always have to take something from that conversation. So if they have more experience than you, take it with a grain of salt and breathe through it. You can't take it personally, you can't take it home with you. I know that there are some areas of the law that are, you become emotionally invested, especially if you're in family law, that gets really tough on the emotions. I think you have to just kind of learn to separate yourself and always think like a lawyer. Be very careful what you say. Be very careful what you write. Emails, doesn't matter if you delete them, they are there forever. You have to be very careful how you respond, whether it's to your colleague, a client, a peer, because you're going to have rough days, but it's how you receive them and how you respond. That's what people remember you by.
Good question. Folks, I know, I think Arthur had his hand raised. Don't think I'm gonna forget about you. So just bear with us and be patient. These are great questions. I know Arthur's next, and then we'll go to the chat, and then Rihanna will be next afterwards too, as well, after the chat question.
Sure.
Arthur, the floor is yours.
Hi, how are you?
How you doing?
Hey, Arthur.
Hey, I had two quick questions. My first question is, how does law school really work? Because I know the first year is basic law, constitutional law, torts, contracts, but right now I'm stuck between three different fields, whether it's corporate, medical malpractice, or insurance law. When should you know what you want to do?
So the good news is that your first year, you're going to be learning your foundational subjects. So your entire year is going to be tort law, which is basically when someone hurts you or there's some injury to your personal property. Your constitutional law, your criminal law, you're going to learn legal research and writing, evidence, contracts. You're going to love contracts. And I know there's one that's just popping out in the back of my mind, and it's for some reason it's escaping me at the moment. Common law, criminal law, tort law. Yeah, I think I named them all. Okay, so that's going to be your entire first year. You're learning your foundational subjects. By your second year, you still have some time. I would say by the second half of your year, you should know more or less where you want to go. I would advise you reach out, you speak with attorneys in the field. You mentioned insurance law, you mentioned corporate law. This is where you want to have a connection with that career office and look for internships and what I like to call informational sessions, which I did a lot of in my second year because I didn't want to wait until I graduated to figure out what I wanted to do. If you're someone that wants to go into criminal law, for instance, and you want to be an assistant prosecutor, you're going to want to make those relationships while you're still in school. It's very competitive to secure a position in as an ADA. So I would say by your second year, you should already have an idea of where do you want to go so you can start tailoring your coursework and your internships towards that, because you're going to have to set yourself up from everyone else. Everyone's going to have a law degree, but what's going to set you apart when you're trying to obtain that corporate law position? Okay. So you really should start making that decision by the second half of your second year.
Okay, my second question deals with is the first year the hardest?
Absolutely, 100%. And I also receive this question a lot. One of the questions I received in the past was, is it the way it is on TV? Yes, 100% yes. You're gonna stand up in front of the class. You are going to be asked all the tough questions, and you're going to have to be able to respond to the professor one after one. They want to test your knowledge of whether or not you understand what the case is trying to tell you. What about that case stands out? How did it develop this area of the law? But it is the best training you will ever receive when it comes to analytical thinking and your critical thinking skills. It's very tough, it's very challenging. You're going to be reading a lot. Easily at minimum 200 pages a night. But it's doable. And if that's the only thing you're doing your first year, you just get through it like everyone else.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. So folks, Miranda and Aaron, hold on. I don't want you to unraise your hands, because I'm gonna go right into the chat, and then we'll go to Miranda, and then I'll go to the chat, and then I'll go to Aaron, all right? So the chat real quick, and I'll ask the question, any recommendations on the LSATs?
Yes, for the LSATs, definitely invest in a course. Back when I was taking it, there was Kaplan, there was Princeton. It might have changed over the years. Definitely invest in a course. I would put the time in. You know yourself, you know if you're a standardized test taker. Definitely test yourself and see how you would do. Take a mock exam. If you're not scoring anything above, and Edwin, correct me if I'm wrong, they still, let's say to get into Fordham with a 3.8 GPA, you want to have between a 158 and above a 160. That's setting the bar really high. So you're going to have to be a really solid test taker. I know someone that took 6 months to prepare for the LSAT because they know they needed that time. Put the time in. If you have to wait and let that administration pass and postpone it, do it, because you can only take the LSAT once. It's not like the SAT. When you take it more than once, they average your scores together. So if you don't do exponentially higher than the first time you took it, it actually can hurt you because they average out the scores. So you only want to take it once, and you want to have a solid score that makes you a competitive candidate in comparison with your internships, your experience, the package that you're submitting to law school, and your GPA.
Absolutely right, Leyla. Totally right. Miranda, question is yours. The floor is yours.
Okay, hi. I just
Yeah.
have combined two questions basically. So my current GPA is 4.9, 3.9, sorry. And I'm doing combined degree in John Jay. I will be done next semester. It's basically Bachelor's of Science and master's degree together. So the only reason I took the master's because I wanted to have something that will separate me, because my job doesn't have to do anything with legal stuff.
Okay.
So something on my record so I can get somewhere. I'm trying to apply to one of the Ivy League schools for law school. So what do you think my chances? What should be all on my application? If I'm missing anything, what's the most important thing apart of that from the LSATs and my record? And also, yeah, that's technically my first question.
I was very lucky when I was at John Jay. I was working for the English department, and because I also minored in English, and one of the professors was amazing. She helped me write my personal statement. So I'm pretty sure they still do require a personal statement with the law school applications, right? Put your time into that. A lot of people think that their personal statement should reflect their resume. Your resume cannot be compared to a personal statement. You have to be creative with it, and that has to be an example of who you are. So I'll give you an example of what I did from my personal statement that I think gave me admission into St. John's. I was offered admission into St. John's University, which was highly competitive at that time. I had the opportunity at John Jay to stay at a Navajo Indian reservation for 10 days and research their criminal justice system. Me and like 30 other people. We were chosen to go to this federal reservation. Great experience. So I was able to take from that experience and explain using Navajo principles what engaged me about the law and why I took from that experience and I applied it to my desire to become an attorney, right? So something completely different. I didn't talk about what internships I had or what my GPA was. I talked about something that was pivotal in my life that opened myself up, opened that desire to become an attorney. So you really want to put your all into your personal statement. And if you have to have someone else with fresh eyes that is way more experienced in life, look at your package before you send it in, do that, because you only have one opportunity to make that first impression. Okay, so your grades and your master's degree is amazing, but you're competing with people who might be taking this opportunity to do a second career. And so they have all of this life experience behind them. So you have to really set yourself apart, put your time into your personal statement and what you submit to the law schools. Definitely.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, what I know from friends and people who's in the legal system, they tell me that if I don't get in like very prestigious school, my chances of getting like a good job offer after will be low.
No.
So
100% no.
No, 100% no. I could speak for Leyla, and I know personal experience. I know folks who've gone to Fordham Law, Emory, have gone to Columbia, and they're quite successful in their
Yes.
own right. There are wonderful law institutions. So, yes, it's a great goal to go through, but
Mhm.
also don't sell yourself short of not looking at other law schools, because there's a plethora of great law schools
Mhm.
in this country in general that will fit your needs. So I mean, I can only say that from that, as I used to be in admissions from that standpoint.
Right.
Leyla, definitely, she's successful. She didn't go to Columbia,
I
and
didn't.
successful in your own right, so, nothing wrong with that if you choose to shoot for the moon on that, but don't feel that you won't be successful because you didn't go to that specific law school.
I mean, if I can give you a recommendation, the way I applied to law schools was I picked 9. The 3 top that, based on my grades, based on my experience, the most competitive that I thought I had a shot of, but it was a little, it was almost there, but you just never know. My 3 solid that I knew I'd get into, and the 3 that, they weren't my first choice. They might have been 4th tier, but they were local. And, I was caught between staying in my area or moving to go to law school, which is what I felt was very helpful, just to get away from the city. So you want to cast a wide net, because I think every law school offers something different. And if you're looking to specialize in a particular area of law, you might want to know what their clinics are, what programs they have. Do they have relationships with companies that you want to work for, right? You want to look at what their bar passage rate is. There's so many variables that you want to look at that non-Ivy League schools also offer. So don't shut the door on that, because you'd be surprised.
thank
Great
you.
question.
And thank you so much. I just had to ask. You just relieved some pressure off me, honestly.
Oh,
And
no. And if I could just add some insight to that, when I graduated was 3 years after 9/11, which was the worst economy for attorneys. I mean, people were scrambling for jobs. We were still feeling the repercussions of 9/11. So I graduated in a very difficult time. I started law school during 9/11. So it was very hard for my class, and we all did well. So, don't listen to the naysayers. You have to cast a wide net to ensure that you have the best range of possibilities and opportunities possible.
All right, excellent. I'm gonna go to the question in the chat. Aaron, you're next, but first let me get a question in the chat here. This is a good question. When you're in an industry for so long and excitement fades out, how do you stay motivated?
Always learn. So I'll tell you what I do here. I am very much dependent on technology. I think it's a great thing, so definitely know how to use it. And I have like this little, you have your favorites bar at the top of your screen where you could just click on something and add it to your favorites. I have a little reading list bar, and I assign myself reading every week on an area that I'm not familiar with, because it's not enough to come in and do your job. You have to constantly test yourself. how am I bringing value to this company? So like, let's say you're working in a law firm, right? And you're working in medical malpractice. So you're like, great, I'm going to be the best medical malpractice attorney ever created, right? And you're going to be the first one in, last one out. But guess what? Now there's a shortage in another department. And now they kind of need you in land use or real estate. You know, you have to assign yourself the responsibility of constantly challenging yourself to learn something that you're not familiar with. If you know you have a weakness in research, now is the time to start testing yourself and continuously learning. Another thing that I do is I'm very active in other organizations where I'm with more experienced attorneys. So I learn from them. I ask questions. That's how I stay motivated, because an attorney that's been doing this for 30 years, that's kind of humbling because you know that they could run circles around you. So it's all about recognizing your weaknesses, recognizing what you don't know, and always being in front of the curve, because there's going to be that one time where you're going to be challenged to know something, and it'll set you apart from everyone else in the office when you can bring value in that manner and say, oh, you know, I did read about that case, or I do know about that legislation, but it's still pending, but I'm following it, boss. It's all about constantly being better. You know, your job doesn't end once you have the associate position. You have to continuously get better at your craft. That's how I do it.
Good one. Aaron, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. I'm
Yeah.
I'm Aaron. I'm going to be a senior in John Jay in the fall.
Nice.
I study political science, and the past couple of years I've had a little bit of like a shift in what I wanted to do. You know, when I came here, I decided I was going to try to go to law school and prepare for the LSAT. You know, however, this past summer I still want to do it, but I pushed it back a little bit because, you know, I had things just happen, and like I had a little bit of a different field of career paths and stuff like that. You know, with that said, I was wondering, like, say if I wanted to push it back, like, I don't know, a year, 2 years or whatever, would that like throw me off as far as being prepared, like between the time it takes me to get my bachelor's degree and the time I prepare for the LSAT and want to go to law school?
Not at all. That's what I mean by non-traditional. So the traditional path is you go to college, you go straight into law school as soon as you graduate. There's a tremendous amount of value working in the real world for a year or two, and just taking a breather if you feel like you need it. The only thing I would caution is that once you hit that second year, and you know, you're not in school anymore and you're not prepping for exams or finals, you know, you have to know yourself, right? So if you find that you're getting a little too comfortable not having to worry about that exam at the end of the semester, you know, it's time to get yourself back into school, because law school is a commitment and it's nothing like college. It's, you know, it's graduate school, which means that you have to be motivated even when you don't want to be motivated, because if you're not, you're going to fall behind. So I would say if you feel like you need the time, take it, but you have to give yourself a limit, because it does get a little harder to go back into it.
Nice. And my second question is, and you sort of touched upon a few points that I also was going to ask in my second question, but on that, it's like with me, I was thinking about, I know this is sort of like on the opposite end of the spectrum, but like I was thinking of going and being the police with the police, and like just studying for the L exam, the law school exam. And back in my day in undergrad, I wasn't like the strongest math student. If I wanted to do something like you know, cybersecurity or law, or like business, corporate law, like, you know, would that mean that I'd have to brush up on, like, you know, my skills at math? And also, would there be like sort of resources or whatever for people like me that go that path to help prepare for that kind of stuff?
So your question is whether or not you decided to do an alternate career, whether that would be a bar or make it more difficult for you to go into law school. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would always recommend acquiring professional experience because I think it makes you a different type of student. You've already worked in the professional environment. You've acquired a different set of skills. You're not coming in with that anxiety of being a student because you've already worked in corporate America or for law enforcement, which is very high stress. So, studying for a few exams, it's not that daunting. I think it makes you a better student.
For Aaron.
So, I wouldn't allow that to even concern me if I were you. There's
Thank you.
different ways to roam, like they say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Let's get in the chat. There's a question here. I'm siphoning through order. So folks, if you read stuff from the chat, I will definitely get to it. We have plenty of time still. How hard is the bar exam compared to your time in law school?
Oh my gosh. It makes me chuckle because the biggest joke is that everything that's on the bar exam is not what you're taught in law school. So what I mean by that is, you're in law school, you're taught to walk. No, actually, you're taught to crawl, and then you have to stumble, and then you have to walk, and then you run. The bar exam is you get up and you just start running a marathon. Like you're not even sprinting. So it's more of like an endurance test. And you have to prepare for it in such a short period of time. It does become overwhelming. I found the bar exam difficult, but again, being the non-traditional person that I was, I took the bar, I already had a toddler, and if I recall, I was expecting my second when I took it. So everything that could have been difficult for me wasn't so difficult for me because I had worked a lot of years by then. I was already in the professional corporate environment. So for me, this was just a test. But kid you not, it is very, it's a daunting exam, and you have to be great at synthesizing in a short period of time. You'll remember me when I say this in 3 years. Don't feel pressured into taking a commercial bar course. Yes, I said it. I think that there's tremendous value in having a tutor. You have to practice writing. You have to practice your essays. You have to practice taking multiple choice. So you have to practice the exam. And what happens is folks that don't do well in a class environment, that's time that they could be using doing and writing and memorizing. So just imagine being in a class for 6 hours and now you have to go home and take that material in and practice. You're exhausted. So there's different ways to go about it. So by your 3rd year, you're going to see everyone running for all these commercial bar courses. Take a step back and understand who you are as a learner. Are you an auditory learner? Are you visual? Do you need to write to remember things? Then you might do well in a different type of environment. So keep your ears and eyes open. I think Barbary and all the big wig names, they're great at what they do. I'm not taking anything away from them, but don't be afraid to do something a little different if you feel like it will teach you the law better. So definitely take that exam serious. It's everything.
Awesome. Wow, it's intensive.
I told you I'm gonna be brutally honest.
It's good. It's not the first I've heard about the bar exam. Trust me. It's good honesty to look forward to. Okay, the question in the chat is, if I wanted to study law in Florida, could I come back to New York and take the bar year? I'm assuming so. That's a yes.
The question was whether or not they can, if they were to take.
If they study law in Florida, could they come back in New York and take the bar?
Absolutely, and I'd recommend it. Go to the beach. No, totally. So after COVID, and I don't know if they're gonna continue this, a lot of states have decided to do remote hosting of the bar exam. So what that means is you're literally sitting in front of your own computer in your home and you're taking the exam, you're just monitored with their software. I don't know if they're gonna have that by the time you graduate, but yeah, you could study anywhere and just come in and sit for the exam in person. And I would always recommend you do more than one state.
Awesome. Okay, another question here in the chat. Being in the law field, there are many times that efficient communication can be very critical. What are some keys that you say or do to get people immediately like you, or more so willing to listen to you?
That's a great question. You have to agree with them. And what I mean by that is they're going to have a view that you completely don't agree with. You have to find that middle ground. So a great way that I start off a negotiations when I know what I want is not what they want. You always want to start off by saying, I can see your point. I understand what you mean. And then take something that they said and say, I know why you would want to go X, Y, and Z, right? And then take a pause and then say, but this is the reason why I'm suggesting this. What do you think? So you're giving them the power to kind of sit back and say, oh, okay, well, she does agree with what I'm saying. Why would I not want to agree with some of what she's saying? Right? So it's about not being abrasive. When you're trying to talk over someone, people want to be heard. So you got to hear them. You have to find a middle ground, and then you have to humbly suggest where you're trying to go. You may not get everything out of that conversation your way, but more likely than not, you're both going to be happy by the time that's over. So you have to find that middle ground, and you have to show them that you're listening. Never talk over someone, especially if they're that person that just wants to come at you. Got to breathe through it.
That's a good question. Great response.
That's a very good question. I've never been asked that before.
It's a good one. Another question here is, how many times can you take the bar? I don't think there's a limitation, but it's expensive. If I'm wrong.
It's very expensive.
Yeah.
Try not to take it more than once, but there are some jurisdictions that put a cap on how many times you're allowed to take the bar. New York is not one of them. New Jersey is not one of them. I mean, I know folks that have taken the bar like 5 or 6 times. Because again, it's a difficult exam. But you know, you keep at it, you do what you have to do, but don't go in there saying I'm going to take it more than once. Trust me, it's not something you want to do more than once.
So I've heard. One question is, how does the character and fitness test work? I don't know if that's in relation to that or.
So what happens is you're gonna find that the application to take the bar is enormous. They want to know where you lived for like the past 10 years, where you worked at for the past 10 years. Do you have any financial obligations? I mean, they go through your financial, your criminal history, if you have any, where you went to high school, college, where you live, the whole 9 yards. Very, 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 I wouldn't say invasive, but they just want to know where you've been for the past 10, 15 years. That gets submitted to character and fitness. When you pass, they go through all of that material and they'll call up your references. They'll verify everything. If something comes up that just doesn't mesh, like let's say, for example, you said, you know, I didn't pay my taxes for the past couple of years and it was actually 3, chances are that'll come up and they'll come back and they'll question you. So will you get in trouble? You know, not if it was an innocent oversight and you're able to clarify that it was an oversight, right? It's all about how you respond and document. But they're very thorough. So always take the time to answer truthfully and completely. And if you're not sure, say so. Because the character and fitness can hold up your ability to swear in if you pass. And after you take that exam, you want to get sworn in immediately. So put the time into your bar application, it stays on your record for a while.
Question. Great response. We have 10 minutes, folks, left. Again, I see the hand raised for Arnell Shallow. If I'm pronouncing that correct, I hope so. I apologize. The floor is yours.
It's pronounced correct. How you doing?
Sorry.
Hi.
I have a question. Okay. I've been to a total of 2 schools. So I've been from SUNY to CUNY, right? So now I'm in my last year of my undergrad and I'll be getting my Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice. Now, when applying to law schools, will that be an issue when they see like, because I know that I spoke with a couple law schools and they said that they want to see consistency from the beginning of your undergrad up until when it's time to apply to law school. So like, will that be an issue with the transitioning from SUNY to CUNY?
Oh, because you you went to 2 institutions?
Yeah.
prior to graduation, so you were in a SUNY school, then you transferred?
Yeah, due to GPA and due to financial obligations. I'm just curious because I'm like a little scared because I don't want them to say, oh, well, you know, this person's not serious and, you know, things of that nature.
No, because there are so many ways to explain that, right? I mean, I know folks that had to transfer because they had to care for one of their parents. I mean, life happens even when you're in school, right?
Right.
So they had to transfer and, you know, maybe some type of, you know, family obligation popped up and it affected their grades. I mean, there's so many things that can happen. And remember, who you are as an undergrad is completely different from the person you become when you graduate, right? So that's what I was saying about how you submit your application package. You want them to know who you are. So in your case, you might have had an experience that was challenging and you decided to continue the course, and the best course of action was to transfer and recollect yourself, right? You could turn that story right around and bring it to your favor. I mean, I don't know all the factors of it, but this is where I say it is so helpful to take a step back and think of your entire life experience and how you want them to view you when they're looking at your law school application. But don't let that scare you from applying. It's so many things. There's thousands of students that have so many challenges just like yours, worse or easier. Don't let that dissuade you.
Okay, and another question that I have is that I hear, this is the things that we hear. I hear that like if you, oh, I'm so sorry. I hear that if you study like in New York, you cannot work. Like if you study full-time in New York, that you can't work as like a full-time student, that law has to be like the dedicated, something of that nature like that. Is that true?
Oh, okay. So they're probably saying that you can't have a job or you can't work when you're in law school. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
So, you know, I was one of those people saying that when I first started. And what I have since learned is there are some people who do better working and making law school an aspect of their lives. So what that means is you might be that type of person that does better in a part-time law school program, and they do exist. And because you need that separation, you need to work part-time and you want to go to school part-time and you perform better. Some folks, they can't do anything else but just law school full-time, no job. And then yet there are others who get stressed out from that type of environment because they can't handle a full-time program without working in their first year of law school. I think if you're trying to do law school in 3 years, you want to do a full-time program, but just know that your first year is critical. So if you don't do well, that kind of sets you for your second and third year. It's a lot of material and it's a lot of responsibility. So if you can afford it, definitely let law school your first year be your only job. However, there are part-time evening law school programs out there. I think Brooklyn Law School does it. And it works for them. It's a lighter load. Just only by one class, you're like taking one less subject, but that can mean all the difference in your grades. You know, you just have to know yourself and you have to assess where you are in life and whether working full time and going to school at night, how are you going to be able to handle that? You know, you have to understand who you are.
Okay, thank you.
And last question before we end the session. This is an interesting one, Arthur. Brought up a basic article stating that, you know, in tuition increases for law school, a significant amount, more than half of the law school graduates take on jobs that pay up to 3 times less than the amount of loans they took out, essentially stating that if you do not go to a top school, you won't be making nearly as much. What are your thoughts on this? And the school used an example in the article was University of Miami. Now, before you answer that, Leyla, I'm gonna say something real quick.
Oh, I have a real good answer for that one.
Real quick. I know you have a great answer for that. I can't wait to hear that one too. But I will say this, there are many states. Now, this is just particularly talking specifically only in Florida. Florida, it's a state of mind. How they run things is a little bit different, but there's many states that offer incentive if you want to work in public service or some sort of another that will pretty much essentially pay for all your law school. You know, so you definitely want to look into that too as well. I know New York State has specific programs on that, on high needs demands. I'm only speaking for New York State, but you know, I mean, it's graduate school. I mean, I'm sorry that it's a commitment, and it's a valid question to ask. And I know Leyla could probably touch on that better, but you know, I hope that doesn't scare you on pursuing what you want to pursue. And I know tuition is very important, and you know, loans and all that bit, but there are states and there are programs that will pretty much wipe out a lot of the stuff. You know, so I'll leave that for the Leyla too as well, if you have any input on that.
Okay, so I'll just give you some substance to that, right? So in 2004, again, the economy was still suffering after 9/11. The firms were taking full advantage of that. And what I mean by that was there was an oversaturation of attorneys, and there were positions out there for 30,000 a year, if you can imagine that, 30,000 a year, okay? And so I had to make a decision, right? So, you know, I signed my name on the dotted line. I was coming out with law school debt, and that actually sparked me on that path to do an alternate legal career. Because in my mind, I said, hey, I have a law degree. I'm extremely marketable. I can totally do this. But right now, I want to make some money and I want to pay down these loans. And what I found was I enjoyed what I did. I was in commercial real estate. I was working alongside brokers, clients of real estate that were doing big things, big projects in New York. And it was just bumping up my resume. It was great money. Commercial real estate, for those of you who've never heard of it or never thought about going into it, there's plenty of opportunity there. Definitely reach me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. And that's what I did for quite a few years before I went back into law. But that being said, even if I didn't go that route, I wouldn't let it dissuade you, because a lot of folks think that the only place to work is New York. And you have to think broader, right? There are plenty of states, plenty of areas, different qualities of life. It depends on what you're looking for. Other states that don't have as high taxes. I mean, listen, I'm Brooklyn born and bred. I love New York. But you have to have a broader mind and think about, where do you want to spend the rest of your life? Where do you see yourself growing, right? Do you want to own a house? Do you want to make investments? You know, how are my taxes are going to be impacted? That might drive where you apply to law school. New York has the higher costing law schools. I mean, there is tremendous. I paid easily my first year, $22,000. By the time I was in my third year, it was $26,000 per year. And I know easily law schools over 30,000 a year, 35, maybe even 40. But you got to know that it's an investment and it's going to open up so many doors for you. You could do anything with a law degree. And you could really make a good career if you're willing to market yourself. Don't let it dissuade you.
Thank you, Leyla. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
So,
You know, I've heard this so many times, and, you know, listen, medical students graduate with $300,000 in debt, but guess what? They know that for the rest of their lives, they're never gonna make less than 300,000 a year, right? So you gotta look at it. What is gonna be your net worth 10 years from now? Yeah, it's gonna hurt a little bit. You're not gonna make as much money, but I will tell you, I'm very satisfied with where I'm at, because you really don't make money until you're at least 10 years out, because you're in a different frame of mind. You're willing to take different risks. In the beginning, you're just trying to get your feet wet, and you're going to change your job a few times. So, you know what? The stakes are not that high. Don't worry about it your first 5 years out. Then you start making, you know, don't be afraid to move on. Don't be afraid to reassess every 2 to 3 years. Every 2 to 3 years, I was comparing where I thought I should have been. So if I wasn't obtaining the level of experience that I needed to ask for that job with 20 to 30,000 more than I was making, there was a problem. So I had to reassess. Do I need to strengthen a certain area? Do I need to learn a new skill? What's going to make me more marketable? So don't go to your job thinking you're going to be there 10 years from now, unless they're going to pay you really well 10 years from now. Okay? Reassess every 2 to 3 years. Where should I be salary wise? People go into their jobs and they forget to reassess. You got to reassess.
Leyla, you're absolutely right on that one. From personal experience, I mean, I used to be a police officer, and when we started, and it was during the recession, and I was an academy student, I was making 25 a year, and it sucked for a little bit. But again, you know, I reassessed 3 or 4 years. Where do I want to be at? Where do you want to go at? Where do you see your future at? And you hit it on the nail. That is excellent. So I definitely encourage that, folks. Please keep that in mind. All right. I guess this is all. Definitely want to thank.
I'm sorry,
Yes?
I'm sorry, before you say that, there's some folks that are asking for my LinkedIn, so I'll just shoot you
Sure.
LinkedIn, and then you can
Oh, sure.
send it to them, okay?
So just keep in mind, folks, I'm gonna put my email in the chat. So if you want Leyla's LinkedIn, you know, you're more than happy to send that to you. Just give me an email, shoot me an email, and I'll be more than happy to do so. But I definitely want to give a round of applause, if you can, if you give it to Leyla, for taking her time and sharing all this wisdom and her time as well. So thank you so much. I cannot much.
No problem. It was a
Appreciate
pleasure.
Thank you all for taking the time to as well, for coming in and having great questions. And with that said, you folks are more than welcome to leave. You don't have to stay.